Hello, everyone. I'm Shannon Torrance, and welcome to Magic is Real, a podcast focused on proof of afterlife, whose mission is to bring hope and inspiration to others and to spread the word that death is only an illusion. If these interviews resonate with you and you want to hear more like them, you can support the podcast by liking, subscribing, and sharing with like-minded friends. Thank you so much, and thank you for being a part of the Magic is Real family. I wish you peace, light, and love always. Hello, Magic is Real listeners. Today, I am here with two wonderful people. One in this Brady Bunch little square. That one over there is my friend Melissa, who is a dear friend of mine. That guy down there, that is Brian Bowles, someone I am just getting to know and loving. He is a medium and the author of Letter to a Young Medium, rather, which I am fully enjoying. And it's what I love is it talks about his own journey to mediumship, but also is kind of it's like a guide for mediums, but also for all of us. For me as a medium, it's actually very encouraging and inspiring and gives me a lot of just new ideas and encouragement, because mediumship can be such a crazy journey. And also it talks about how all of us can connect. So without further ado, because that was a lot of ado, I'm going to let Brian do his thing. He's going to give my friend Melissa a reading today, and I'm just going to get out of the way. So thank you.
Okay, so thanks again, Melissa, for being willing to sit with me.
Oh, thank you.
And have this chance to connect with you. This is really fun. So as I feel into the space, what I am noticing is I have a younger man with me, and he's taller and skinnier, and his hair is kind of parted, and it's brown hair. So this young male's taller, skinny, and he has brown hair that's parted, and feels to me as if he would have died suddenly. It doesn't feel medical to me. It feels more, it feels like more like of an accident or something of that nature, but it feels like he would have passed suddenly. Does that make sense?
If not, I might have to tell my loved ones to get out of the way, because that does describe somebody that I know. So I'm just going to do that.
Well, I can't. So that's the funny thing. So with mediumship, the spirit will take the opportunity it's going to have. So does this make sense then for you, Shannon?
Well, it does. So let's just
Okay.
see where that goes.
And he's kind of a taller fellow, and and he was quieter, more introverted, kind of had a more serious kind of soul, very gentle, very kind. Wouldn't always know what he's thinking. Does that make sense?
Yeah, a bit. Yeah, he was
Okay.
funny, but also quiet. So we'll see where that goes.
Okay, and he's a family member. Does that make sense? No. Okay. Was he a boyfriend or a friend?
A friend.
Okay. And it feels to me like he would have died suddenly.
Yes.
Let's see. It doesn't feel medical to me. It feels more tragic to me than that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It feels like it was likely an accident or something of that nature. Does that make sense? And it feels like he died in the hospital or on the way to the hospital. It doesn't feel like he died at the scene of where this occurred. Does that make sense?
I don't know.
Okay. All right. That's okay. And I feel like he's taller than you. I feel like there's a playfulness between the two of you. There's like a way that he would hug you, but you're like hugging his, like your head hits his chest. He feels tall to me.
Yes.
That makes sense. And he feels like he was kind of gentle and quiet. I almost feel like he almost feels to me like somebody that would have played basketball, because he's just got that comfort with his hands, and he's just kind of, it's hard to explain what I mean by that, but it just feels to me like he's very gentle, and he would kind of, when he'd greet people, he'd often be taller than them, but he was never imposing. He's not that kind of personality. He's actually really low key. He kind of makes people comfortable with him. He goes out of his way to make people comfortable with him. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And he is kind of a gentle, somebody that is tactile, somebody that will hug, and somebody that's very caring, somebody that really listens. And he doesn't do jokes at other people's expense. He has more of that camaraderie feeling to me. Does that make sense?
Yes.
But I feel like he was close with his mom, but I feel
Yes.
like there was some issues with his dad. Like I feel like I'm not sure if they were separate, but I feel like he was really close with his mother. Does that make sense?
Close with his mother. I don't know about his relationship with his father.
Okay. I feel like he would have been more connected with mom. And I also feel like he had a sister, a younger sister.
I know
I
he
know
has, yeah, I know that, I think actually older.
older. Okay. Anyway, so I just want to acknowledge him for coming through and just want to thank you for coming through. The big thing he's just trying to acknowledge with you is to be a little more gentle with yourself, to practice. He's saying to practice what you preach a bit, to be to the gentleness that you're offering to everybody else to also offer to yourself. Does that make sense?
At times it has, but yes, that's what I feel I'm there now, but I haven't always been. And the other thing I wanted to tell Melissa is that often a message that comes through when there are two people or a crowd and you're reading somebody, oftentimes the message will actually sort of piggyback on another message that
Mhm.
might actually be resonating with you, even though it might be my loved one saying it. It's said so that you can hear it. So also just process some of that and know that it
Wonderful.
also could be in a sense for you as well.
Thank you.
Okay, but I'm going to go to you now, love, and I'm going to see if I can't work with your loved ones. I just, it's so funny how this works.
Yeah.
Because I felt it almost felt like a brother energy to me. Just that he's just, anyway, so he
Yeah,
kind of came
he was a
through.
very good friend of mine.
Yeah, and he just seems, and I had a dear friend of mine die yesterday. So my
Oh,
vulnerability, mediumship's about vulnerability. And so what's interesting is my own vulnerability has been impacted by that. Doesn't mean that I can't do the work. It just means it takes time for me to kind of prime the pump a little bit, if you will.
I'm
I've
so
been there.
sorry
Thanks
to
for being
hear
so generous and kind with me as I work through that, but it means a lot to me. So, but let me work with you, Melissa. Let me just see who I'm feeling with you, love. Okay. So I have a grandmother with me, and I believe she's on dad's side of the family, curly hair that's shorter, and it would have been brown when she was younger. Does that make sense? And she also wore glasses, and she feels like a mom figure to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Both my grandmothers, yeah, have passed.
Okay,
Yeah.
but the other grandmother has more full hair on mom's side. It feels like her hair is also a similar color, but her hair feels like it's thicker. It's still curly, but it feels like there's more to it. Does that make sense? Where this grandmother on dad's side had glasses and her hair was shorter, but still wavy, still curly. Does that make sense? How that's just a bit different? And the
Yeah.
grandmother on mom's
That,
side's a little bit shorter, maybe a little bit overweight, and but on dad's side, she's a little bit more frail. Does that make sense?
other way around, actually. My
The way
my
around. Okay.
my father's mother was a little
More the
heavy
bigger curly
set.
hair. Okay. Got it, love.
But
Okay.
she had the short, yeah, short curly wavy hair, and then I'm sorry, my mother's mother was very petite. And
Okay.
frail.
Okay. Okay. So, and the grandmother that would have, this will help me to kind of figure out which spirit I'm supposed to be working with. So the grandmother that would have a statue of Mary, or that would be connected to Mary. Is there one of them that you would identify? Let me just feel for a second.
That's
Dad's side of the
interesting.
family.
Well, what I know is that I was named after a Mary. I
Okay.
never knew her, but I know that my name starts with an M and I was named after a Mary.
Okay. But this to me feels more like let me see. It just feels to me like she was somebody that would, the grandmother on dad's side. It feels to me like she was somebody that, I want to make sure I'm working with the right spirit, because I think I'm getting the where I placed them mixed up. I think I'm getting wrong. So just give me a second. So
Yeah.
the more frail one, the skinnier one is on mom's side. Okay, gotcha, love. Okay. It feels to me like there's a real sense that she had issues with her hands with arthritis. It feels to me like she was very serious, kind of a more serious person. It feels like she had, and you said that but the grandmother on dad's side had the shorter hair. Is that right, love?
A little bit shorter. Yeah.
And she wore glasses, but only for reading. She didn't wear them all the time.
Yeah.
And
She wore like a chain with reading glasses.
yep, a chain, exactly. Yeah. And in fact, they're folded and the whole bit. And but she was the one that was more kind of focused, and the one that was more serious, the one that was kind of more managed a lot of different things. She liked to be independent. She kind of liked to manage things on her own. She kind of runs
Wait,
a tight ship.
which one are you speaking of?
Dad's side of the family. the
Yes.
woman
Okay.
that we were just interacting with. And I honestly, I don't know that that differentiates them very well because they're kind of both that way, frankly. So let me just kind of see if I can differentiate them better. So let's stay with the grandmother and the dad's side just for a bit. I feel like she crocheted. I keep feeling like the
Sorry.
grandmother crocheted blankets.
Yes.
And she also would do, and they're brown and orange. And I also feel like there's, she would do that for also to place pots on, because she had the thicker, kind of heavier pots that you would use that are more, anyway, they're not what I'm used to seeing. They're kind of not crock pot, that's not the right word.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And she would rest them on these kind of crocheted
Yeah,
squares,
and then
basically.
she would crochet and knit like blankets, and yeah, she was a big cook.
Yeah, but she would do bread. It's like a cornbread, and she would do it inside the pot. It's almost like I feel like I'm lifting out the pot and there's cornbread, or no, sorry, I'm wrong about that. It's more chili, and there's cornbread over here. It's on the baking sheet. It's actually in the clear pan is where the cornbread is. But anyway, so there's just a sense to me that it's kind of comfort food and
Yes.
bowls, and there's also TV trays, and there's two kind of comfy chairs that recline that are fabric, and it feels like there's the table that's between them. And I
That
also
is
feel,
insane.
and I feel
Crazy.
like we're sitting there and there's like a TV tray, and there's the TV is on, and I feel like we're eating basically she's serving us chili and stew too. It's not just chili. She did
Something
stews too.
like
She did kind
goulash.
of a roast, actually. She kind of would cut the roast into pieces, and that's more what she would do more typically. That kind of was a roast, kind of a special
Goulash.
thing. And goulash, that's yeah, because it's got the vegetables and things. And sorry, you're dealing with a Jewish guy, so this is
Yeah, well, we're Jewish
goulashes.
too.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. That's even
Yep.
better. Okay. But anyway, she's very, she can do a lot. She's just always doing something. And there's even a basket there. And sometimes she knits. In fact, her knitting needles are funny because they're sharper, but they're coming out of a basket, but her crocheting needles are longer, and they're plastic though. And what's funny is she would always try to clip the top part with the crocheting, but she would actually do rounded corners sometimes. She didn't always just do the 90-degree corners. She could actually do the beautiful scalp ones.
Yep.
And there's one that's actually brown with pink. It's like brown with pink in the center. And she's wrapping you in that. And there's a sense that your hair was when you were young, your hair was like this. You had the pigtails or something like this. And she would brush your hair, and she would hold you an awful lot. And she'd wrap you in the blanket. But she said you always wanted to do what the boys were doing, and that you were happy to kind of be in all these different worlds. You're really playful. You're a risk taker as a little girl. You're happy to kind of do those things, but you were happy to always help. You were always engaged with her, and you were willing to do anything that you could to be helpful. Does that make sense, love?
A little bit. Yeah.
Okay. Because she did needlepoint too, because she didn't do a lot of that, but there's a needlepoint in the hallway near the bathroom. And she's just highlighting it because that's something to do if you treat children with love, then it's something like that. And there's kind of on the sides of the phrase, you can see flowers kind of growing up the side, but it's just needlepoint. Does that make sense, love?
It's crazy.
I only
A
see
little
one,
bit.
and it's rectangular, and it's framed with wood. It's not in behind glass. Although I think she did have another one in glass, but she didn't do that one. It actually is framed, and it's actually larger. But she didn't do that one. It's more like a poem, and I don't see any flowers on that one or anything interesting. I think you know what I'm talking about. I'm not sure exactly what they say, but she's just highlighting them for me.
Huh.
And does that make sense? Can you validate that, love?
A little bit. I mean, from what I could recall, yeah, she had a lot of
Yeah.
artwork on the walls and by the bathroom.
Okay. Yeah, and it's because she had a tub, like because I'm standing right outside the bathroom, and it's right there in the wall, and I'm looking and I'm seeing the tub, and it almost looks like it's one of those, I could see the window, but I can also see that the tub would be painted. It's almost like green or something like that. It just doesn't look like a white bathtub. It looks more interesting, and it's got does that make sense to you, love, what I'm saying?
It was gray. There was
Gray.
no window in the bathroom though.
Okay, but it's not a window then, it's like a glass door.
Yes.
That's it. I was just there's something shining off that. So I thought maybe there was a window past it. So that's totally my fault.
Yeah, it was sliding glass doors.
Yeah, but on the floor of the
Like,
tub, she actually had the flowers, like the flowers so that it would kind of hold you in place when you're doing your shower. She had those little flowers that are white. And
this
so
is
she's just,
like
I don't know
so
why she's showing me this spooky
specific.
stuff. It's so bizarre. I don't know why she's showing me all this. It's spooky,
I
but
mean, this is all sounding very accurate.
well, I think the point she's just trying to bring to you is that she wants you to trust her feelings more, because she says you lose your voice in relationship, and she's asking, you keep asking for her guidance, but you're not trusting her. You get the clarity, but you don't take the action. You have a tendency to stay in situations that aren't good for you. Does that make sense to you, what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
She's just saying that when you want the world to know that you matter, you have to also believe that you matter. Does that make sense?
Could you say that one more time?
When you want the world to believe that you matter, you have to also matter.
Mm.
You have to know that you matter. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, she's just saying the change isn't outside of you, the change is inside of you. And she had to learn that lesson the hard way herself, because she was often giving her money away and things of that nature, and she didn't have very good boundaries at times. Melissa, give me a name and relationship of who you want to connect with. Let me see if he'll come through.
Give you a name?
Yeah, name and
Uh,
relationship. That's all I need. I don't need any more information than that. We'll just see if, because there's a spirit who you want to connect with who hasn't stepped forward. So I want to inspire that.
I would
Okay.
love to connect with a close friend, Sandy.
Okay, that's all I need. Okay, let me just see if she'll come through. Okay, so I have a woman with me who has wavy hair, but it's almost like two-toned. In other words, there's some highlights in it, and it's wavy and it's dark. It's kind of not super dark, but it's brown with a little bit of lighter tones to it. But she's got more narrow eyes, and she was a normal height or maybe a little bit shorter, and just kind of really kind of scrappy, kind of has a scrappy energy to her, but also really kind. Does that make sense? Very resourceful. But I feel like she had a prolonged illness. Does that make sense? She didn't die suddenly. And I feel like you were a part of that. You supported her in that journey. And it feels like it was a prolonged experience. And it feels like it was, but I feel like she's in the hospital, but then I feel like there's a hospice piece that came in after that. So I feel like she died at home, and I feel like it feels like cancer to me, but it feels like it kind of was further along than she was expecting it to be. Does that make sense what I mean?
Yeah,
Things
there
went,
was
things went a
cancer.
lot more quickly than anybody would have expected.
Yeah, there was cancer involved. There was no hospice, but she did pass in a hospital, not at
Yeah.
home.
Yeah, but there's an event that got her to the hospital, and then there's organ failure. And it's almost like they had to turn off the machines and things. And it felt hospicey at the end because they turned all the machines off, and it was quiet. There was kind of a peace around her death. And after, there's a sense that you guys were letting her go. It's almost like literally as if you're letting her go, but it took longer than people were expecting. Does that make sense?
A little bit. I wasn't there for it, but
Okay.
that's
But that would
very,
have been the journey she would have gone on with her health. Does that make sense? And you would have actually seen her when she was ill, though, because there's a sense of you being beside her and holding her hand, and you're standing. Does that make sense?
I wasn't
She's
with
sitting
her
in
at
a
the
chair.
hospital.
No, not at the hospital. So no, but she would have been sick at this point, and you're
Yes.
standing beside her and you're holding her hand. You're not sitting with her. She's sitting in a chair, or she's not in bed. She's in a chair. It feels like she has blankets and she's sitting in that chair. And it feels like you're standing there holding her hand. You're actually using both of your hands to gently cup her hand.
Hmm.
And you're just listening. And you actually got down to her eye level at one point. Does that make sense?
A little bit. Not exact.
It's okay, but she's eating soup. And there's a sense that you're just checking on her and you're making sure that she has water. There's a big thing about water with you, and you're actually doing something with her forehead. And there's something about the lips too. I feel like you gave her lip gloss or something with the lips. I might be making that part up, but I don't think I am.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a sense that you kissed her on the forehead and hugged her. And there's just feeling like your cheeks are touching. But what's more important is after she died, that feeling that you could feel as if her spirit was with you. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like a real sense that you had an awareness that she had died, but also a sense that kind of you could literally feel as if her soul was touching yours, because there's a tingling feeling and a sense that it was just so overpowering and so intense, but it also made you cry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, let me see one more thing, dear. I feel like there's a man's voice that told you that she had died. Either he texted it or called, but it's a man. She designed it. She wanted it to be him. It's something about she arranged to make sure it was him that told you. Does that make sense, love?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and there's a sense that she died during the day, but it's early in the day. It's like before noon kind of thing. And
That's when I learned that she had passed, but I believe that she passed the night before.
late,
But I had
okay,
learned,
that's
yeah,
when you found out
yeah,
before noon, like a 10:30 a.m. kind of. Okay, that's when the information got to you. That makes more
yeah,
sense.
yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. And it's almost like she died the night before, like at 10, like between 10 and 11. It wasn't that late. You're mentioning it was really late, but she's saying, Brian, it was a little bit earlier. It's like but 10 and 11. And
Hmm.
so it doesn't matter, but who cares? But it's at whatever. But the
Mm-hmm.
point is that she's just she's wanting you to basically know that she's got a higher pitched voice. She's kind of funny and she laughs in a really high pitched way. She makes me want to laugh when I'm with her. She's got
Yeah.
this really high pitched voice and it's so cute. It's just funny to me. I'm
So
like, she should have been like a Simpsons, like she could have been like a voice actor. No joke.
yes.
She's funny.
Oh my
And she's
God.
got this comical kind of voice, but she's just reaching to you and she's saying, sisters, Brian, she didn't tell the truth. We're sisters. And that's never going to change. We're not just friends. We choose each other. We know each other's story and we loved each other. We stood by each other. She got me through the hard stuff, not just cancer. She got me through choosing myself in a hard relationship. She knows what I'm talking about. Does that make sense, dear?
Um, yeah. Yeah. I'm not exactly sure the relationship she's speaking of, but I could imagine what she's speaking of.
I feel like she has a child because there's a remaining spirit of hers. Does she have a son?
So she never had her own children. She has stepchildren.
Okay, but she has a son and a daughter that she claims. Does that make sense?
Yeah, stepchildren.
Are they two sons?
There are 2 sons and 1 daughter.
Okay, that's it. I was going to say it's not enough. So I was like, one son's not enough. So it's a son and daughter, but that wasn't enough. So it's 2 sons. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that makes sense. All right. So because she doesn't feel that way about that connection. For her, it's not, she doesn't think of them as that's not how she thinks of things. She
Hmm.
claimed them. They were hers. She was
Hmm.
mama bear. That's just how it's going to be. Like, these are my kids. And so she just wants you to know that she does look out for them.
Mm.
Wants you to know that she's involved in their lives. She's making sure that they have support lining up and finding them when they need it. And that one of the sons, in particular, the youngest, is having a harder time with this than people are recognizing. And that's the one that really connected with her. And you know which one. Yeah.
Yeah.
He has darker hair and he kind of reaches up to her and bigger cheeks, really lovely. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah.
His hair kind of comes out over his brow and it kind of parts here. She's just showing me a little bit about what he looks like. Probably overthinking it. So forgive me if I do that
Mhm.
sometimes.
That's
Yeah.
okay.
Okay. And there's a thing with birds and her and you. She has this thing with birds and you, and that's how she makes her presence known. She says you think it's a very specific bird, but it isn't, because she gets you to notice hawks, and she also gets you to notice hummingbirds, smaller birds. Does that make sense? It's not just one bird;
Hummingbird.
it's many.
Yeah.
Okay. And even ravens, or crows. It's either crows or ravens, but they're yammering at you from a tree. And
Hmm.
she just loves to irritate you with some of these birds and wildlife. It's more just birds, but
Huh.
there's a playfulness for her around that. Does that make sense?
That's interesting. Mm-hmm.
Do you have any questions for me, love, before we complete?
No, I mean, I so appreciate your time. I mean, some of the
You bet,
things that
Leslie.
you said really resonated tremendously with me. So yeah, I so appreciate it.
Me.
Like I'm just amazed by what you were able to have come through.
Well, mediumship is really, the beauty of it is that we all have access to this part of us, this kind of spiritual part of us, and no one's left out. So you feel everybody's feelings all the time, and you adjust who you are in the room to accommodate that. Shannon does the same thing. We all do. In fact, we're all of us are empaths. So we don't always know what our feelings are. We don't always know what our needs are in a situation because we're often feeling the needs of everybody else. So that can be tough to know what we need.
Right.
And that's why I love that friend of yours. I'm really grateful she came through because she's somebody that actually saw your needs. There was a balance there in your connection. There's a sense that you both cared for one another. There's not imbalance in that relationship. You know what I'm talking about, where you're the caregiver. You're more often the caregiver. You're the sacrificer in relationship. That's not the case with her. She had your back.
Yep.
There's that equanimity that we don't experience very often as kind of caring people. That's what makes it very special, you know?
So would you say she's okay?
So before I answer that, I want her to show it to you. It's going to mean so much more to you than me yammering at you about that. So can you put your hand on your heart? Just join me. Just let her wash over you, just like she did after she died. Feel that feeling like you want to cry? And we don't make up stuff, but I want you just to trust what you're feeling, okay? There you go. See, that's yours. No one can take away what's happening right now to you. That belongs to you. That has nothing to do with me. That's the beauty of this. That's why I always, when a loved one asks me that question, I never, ever, ever steal that moment because that's yours. She's letting you know that she's completely okay. But you didn't need any of my words, did you?
No.
No.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're more than welcome. Thanks for trusting me.
Thank you so much.
When we're grieving, our grief always reveals that we know how to love. Something we should celebrate more within ourselves, right?
Yeah, I agree. It's
And your
just hard.
depression that comes up, you have the seasonal depression piece that comes up for you that you that's how you identify it with people. It's not seasonal. It's more that you give yourself permission to grieve in the winter. You kind of set aside some time for your grief to be seen. So I wouldn't story it in a way where it's a diagnosis. I would just say, this is my time where I give myself permission to let my melancholy be expressed. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
Because you've been through some trauma and some tough stuff in life. So sometimes we need to pull away from the world and let those feelings be there. Okay. So we don't want to make that wrong anymore.
Okay.
Okay. Really lovely to meet you, Melissa.
Thank you so much. A pleasure to meet you. I really appreciate your time.
And Melissa, I just wanted to ask if, for some reason had this sense of turquoise with her, not necessarily jewelry, just the color turquoise. That was, and I don't know what it was, but it was so strong in my field. I just didn't know if it meant something or if I just happened to see it. And then the other thing that just popped in, and sometimes when something pops in, I just say, don't ignore it because it might be something, is I just, those, like when people would write a letter and they do that wax seal, there'd be like a closure of an envelope and a wax seal with like an imprint on it. I saw that. And again, I wasn't attempting to connect. So it may just be something that floated through.
I think that turquoise in that letter stamp is mine. I think it's my aunt.
Is it? Because I also saw buffalo and bison. And I was like, why am I seeing buffalo and bison and turquoise? And I wasn't even necessarily thinking like Native American themes. I was just seeing turquoise. And then I saw buffalo and I heard bison. And did that resonate with you, Brian? Okay. See, that's the thing.
Wow.
Because I knew it was something. I'm like,
That's
it's
my
not
loved one. There's no question.
okay.
I'm not confused about who it is at all.
Okay, well then we're gonna have to dig into that. We're gonna have to dig into that.
I love that.
That's the thing, is I knew, I'm like, this isn't coming from me. And so that's when I asked.
Spirit will take the opportunity. That's how it is. Spirit will always take the opportunity to communicate a message.
Oh, I love it. It's the coolest thing.
That.
It's not and that's what well, after you go, Brian and I are going to talk about this in the interview because I think it's fascinating. It's not a perfect science. Like there will be things that don't resonate, but our job is to winnow grain from chaff and figure out like, you know, I'm just like, there's turquoise, and it's like I'm seeing the color turquoise, which I don't usually see. I do not see colors. It's not, and it was so obvious to me that there's some reason. And then I don't know about the wax seal envelope stamp thing, if that belongs to
I
you too.
do.
You do?
Oh no,
Wow.
the whole thing belongs to me. It's one person. They're
Oh my
putting it, the
gosh.
spirit's placing impressions on you. And so you want to see those as connected because you're literally demonstrating very specific detail about my loved one. So
Okay, well then we might have to, after we finish, I might have to actually find what
Wow.
the message is, because there's got to be a message. See if it comes through now, but and if it does, great. That's, I just felt like
Wow.
someone was trying to get my attention. So that's
you can't make that
amazing.
up.
I
That's too
know.
specific. You have to trust that.
Brian, thank you so much for reading for my friend Melissa. It After the reading, you and I have been speaking, and I'm really excited because, first of all, I do want to know all about you. That's where I'd like to start. I want to know kind of how this came about, what led you to being a medium. Then we're also going to talk a bit about mediumship itself, because I think this is super interesting and can help a lot of people understand that we all have this ability. And we all, that's basically it. I think that's what we're gonna do. So first of all, I would love to know about you. I would love to know about, I have read, I'm reading your book now. I know a bit about your story, but I would love for you to share that with the listeners here. But tell me as far back as you want to go, your childhood, where was your life like? What were your spiritual beliefs? Anything just along the journey that sort of informed what led you to this place. I'd love for you to share.
Oh, I'd be happy to, and I'll kind of give the shortened version of that because I could do a whole podcast on that.
Sure.
But I don't want to take over with that story. But the thing I remember about being a little kiddo was I remember that my grandmother had Alzheimer's, and I remember that my grandmother's spirit. Now, I didn't know that at the time. I'm just going to be really direct because I sometimes you go back to our childhood memories and we imagine ourselves to be these really gifted mediums when actually I don't believe that to be true. But what I had happening was I would wake up at 4 in the morning, and my mom would find me at the kitchen table, and I would be talking to my grandmother's spirit while eating oatmeal, Quaker instant oatmeal. I'll never forget brown sugar, maple sugar or brown sugar and maple syrup. And I would put two things in it, and I would just be chewing on my oatmeal, talking to my grandmother, and it would scare my mom. And I remember one time my mom said, "I need you to stop that." And I did. I stopped it because it was really upsetting. And my mom couldn't figure out, my mom basically what she said to me was I was talking about some of the aspects of what she was like as a little girl and some other weird things. And it just made my mom really uncomfortable. So I stopped doing it. I thought it was kind of bad, kind of wrong, kind of thing, growing up in a Catholic home, but then finding out later my mom's side of the family was Jewish. I mean, so it's interesting how I didn't really have a real strong religious belief because as a gay man, I often felt like religion was telling me I was going to hell because that's what happened. I went to a Catholic priest for a confession because you had to do a confession before you did your first communion in the Catholic Church. That's where you confirm that you're a Catholic, basically. It's around 8th grade, 7th or 8th grade. Well, I had acknowledged with this priest in the confession that I thought that I was gay. And he said that you have the demon of homosexuality living inside of you, and you need to pray to have that demon released. And that demon's never left, and I still love disco. So that didn't go well. So, but that's all to say that the beauty of that, as much as that's kind of a painful story, it's actually a real gift if you think about it. It gave me permission to have my own beliefs. There's a gift when we're excluded because then we're no longer expected to follow what everybody else is doing. They're kind of assumed to be the crazy one. So there's a blessing in that. And now I'll fast forward to this, but at Denver Hospice, when I was working as a family therapist, this medium came to Denver Hospice. She did a presentation and she came up to me and she said, "Brian, you're a medium too." And I'll never forget this. I was like, "Okay, crazy lady." I just thought she was completely nuts. And I was really angry that she would be preying on people that are grieving. I just had this big judgment about all of it. And one of my teammates came, and I was like, oh, can you believe that lady? And she came to me later and she had tears in her eyes. And she said, Brian, that medium saved my life when my son died. That medium literally brought me back to life and gave me a reason to continue to live. She said, if you won't go see her for me or for you, then please go see her for me. And I went and saw her with all this judgment, arms wrapped around my chest tightly. And I thought, I'm not going to give this woman one inkling of information, and she's just going to have to prove this. Well, in 30 minutes, my dear friend who died of AIDS came through. I'll never forget it for the rest of my life. There was no way that she could have made up that information. It's not possible. It just isn't. And so I had to completely let go of all that judgment and nonsense I'd been putting out. I had all this judgment without any, I had not done any work in this arena to find out if it was nonsense or not, but I had all this judgment. It was so, I look back on that, I'm like, what was that about? And then I'll end with this. I remember very well sitting there, and she said, now, Brian, I want you to connect with one of my loved ones. And she said, I'm going to make it easy for you. We're going to have you connect with one of my dogs. So I connected with this dog, and this dog felt like a bear and had lots of hair. It had lion's mane, all this kind of stuff, blah, blah, blah. She goes in her daughter's bedroom. She brings up, I'll never forget it, a silver frame picture, and it had engraved bear on it, and it was a chow. I knew it was real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And I think that's what we all need in
amazing.
this work. I feel like we collect miracles so that we can trust that this path is sincere.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like when we talk about mediumship development, that's really what we're doing. We're collecting miracles so that we can remind ourselves of those miracles on the days when it's not easy, or on the days when we're getting no's, or on the days when we're not trusting ourselves.
I appreciate that so much. And the way you said that, as you and I were just speaking, I was sharing that on my mediumship journey just very recently, my reading started to really get very strong. And I started to get to the point where I felt so confident for the first time ever that every time I went in, it was going to go great. I was like, spirits got me. They're not going to let me fail. I'm just saying it was finally, it clicked, which you learn in mediumship classes. You just have to let go and trust, but that's the hardest thing to do because it's an intangible. And I finally got to the place where I was like, this is working 9 out of 10 times. So, and the evidence is so specific that there is no possible way I could have guessed that.
Right.
I was getting names, I was getting details that were like these esoteric details. And then suddenly I got sick and for 2 weeks, and I went to try to do some readings when I got out, and I just wasn't. It was a lot of no's. No, no, that's not making sense. And I thought, I just lost it. And what I love about your book, and I'm reading it so carefully because anyone can benefit from reading the book because it's interesting, and it also helps us all understand how we all have these abilities. But what I love, I also recommend it specifically for mediums because you talk a lot about this. One of the things that, um, first of all, I'd love for you to explain the basket, getting in the basket, because I love that. And then I was literally today just reading some more pages, sort of talking about um, talking about how people think that somehow mediums are these prophets or more powerful than they are. And yet everybody actually has this ability. We're just trained to do it. That's the only difference. So I know that that's a broad, I'm kind of all over the place, but I just wanted to sort of start. I love the basket that you talked about in your book, and I'd love for you to share about that first and anything else you'd like to share.
Well, the big thing, the idea of the basket was I often feel like in our mediumship development, we have a God problem far more than we have a practice problem. And the God problem is we often have a God that that has not served us because it wasn't ours. So I'm a big believer that we need to find a God or spirit, however somebody languages it, that makes sense to us and belongs to us and feels real for us. And so in the chapter, basically what I talk about is my goofy story is about this female God coming into town. And because I'm sick of God always being portrayed as a man. So in every one of my books, I always talk about God as a woman. And it's really to stand up to that, because I'm sick of asking women to always infer that God is a part of them. I'm not, so I'm pretty insistent that God, and even who cares, but that's my big passion about that. But anyway, in the chapter, this female God kind of comes in, and she says, I'm God, and all the village people come around, all the people in the village come and they say, thank you, God, you're so lovely. And God says, oh, thank you for the praise. I'm so grateful to be here. And God says, well, thank you for coming and spending this time with me. And the townspeople say, yes, we love you, God. We're so grateful for you. We really believe in you. We trust you. And God says, well, I brought my bicycle with me today. And she magically, she snaps her fingers, and all of a sudden, a silver line appears from the ground all the way to the highest mountain. And she rests her bicycle on that magical silver line. And she says, all of you seem to really trust me and believe in me. And the townspeople say, yes, we trust you. We love you, God. We trust you. And she says, okay, then get in the basket. So I feel like that's what mediumship is. I feel like it's this constant invitation to get in the basket, to
Yeah.
trust, because, if you're working in mediumship, we are acknowledging the loss and the suffering of people, often on their very worst day.
Yeah.
So the only way to do that is to trust that there's something greater at play, because if we were responsible for that, can you imagine how hard that would be?
Yeah. I love that you said that too, because I just had this conversation with some friends of mine who've been incredibly supportive. One came from sort of an agnostic, maybe atheist background, and she said, um, I never believed in this. I thought it was all nonsense. And she said, but I know it's happening for you, and you're my best friend, so I know that it's real. And she said, congratulations, you've opened up my mind. But one other thing I've talked about was, I said, it feels uncomfortable sometimes, to well, I said, I have trouble doing this almost as a paid medium. I think, there's that sort of guilt, even though I know that money is an exchange of energy, and and she said, well, what if you look at it as gratitude? But my other friend is a therapist, and I said, I think the thing that we're actually paid to do when we are paid for it is that this is what you were talking about in your book. It's not just that we are connecting with spirit and interpreting their messages and giving it to the other person, which in itself is miraculous and incredible. We're also acting as, I know, I'm not a grief counselor, but I am able to basically just hold space for someone as they're going through grief. And what we give is, so, allowing that person to share memories of their loved one for as long as you want to talk about it. I'm here with you in that moment, saying, tell me about your son. I want to know all, I can feel him. And it's almost like I'm getting to meet this woman's son, for example, because I've read quite a few women who've lost children. And I said,
Mm.
I can feel him. And when I'm describing him and saying the things that he liked, and they're crying and saying, yes, yes, this is him. It's also that we act as just sort of an emotional support person. And you were talking about that in your book as well. Anything you'd like to say about that is welcome.
No, I really, Shannon, I frankly just love what you said so much. It means so much to me. It's, there's a danger in mediumship becoming about the medium,
Yep.
because in the work, we can impress people and have people think we're special and lovely and all that. And that can be very distracting.
Yeah.
And I'm not above that. I think we all go through this lesson in our mediumship journey, where we get distracted and we start to think this is about us. And we start to imagine that we're something beyond or special or what have you. But the danger of that is, I often think about us being in the river, and when we're hurting, all of us, mediums aren't special in that regard. I've had a lot of recent loss, and we don't skip the grief journey. It belongs to us too. And I actually don't think we'd have anything to offer our clients if we did skip those things, if we were somehow above the human experience. I don't think we have anything to offer. It's because we hurt that we understand the chord of other people's pain. And so I'm a big believer that in mediumship that we're companioning somebody else's grief. We're not making it better. We're not pretending to be wise about things that we aren't. We're not throwing a bunch of adages at a mother whose son completed suicide and insisting that she feel better because, well, gosh, mom, we continue on. What's the problem? So it's a beautiful thing to let people suffer, to allow people to be in pain with us and not insist they be anything other than who they are. And
Beautifully
that takes a
said.
lot of work.
Yeah, and it's not the work of mediumship is not just look at this cool trick I can do.
That's
And
right.
I know I even sometimes feel uncomfortable when they'll say, um, tell me, well, what's going to happen next or what, and I always tell them I'm just a human being. I'm not going to tell you that I know for sure that you are going to win the lottery or um and I'll give an example. The other day I read a beautiful woman who I is now I consider her a friend now. We spent a lot of intimate time together. Um, and I just looked at 711, and that is one of my angel numbers. So that's funny. But she had said, can you tell me what my son saw or is doing on the other side? What's it like there? And I said, okay, I'm just going to tell you, I'm a human being. I don't want to, I talk to near death experiencers all the time. I don't want my own biases to get in the way. I'm just going to sit here and what I tell you what I see. And I heard the song and I saw, I said, he's telling me to listen to the song Across the Universe by the Beatles. Now, I know the song, but I've never listened to the lyrics. It's not a song I know well. And she said the Beatles was his favorite band. And then I went and looked at the lyrics afterwards and I got full body chills because I said,
Wow.
it describes heaven. If heaven, the other side, the other dimension, whatever it is that you feel comfortable calling that state of consciousness. And I trusted that because it didn't come from me. But I always say to my sitters, I'm just a person. I could be wrong. So please don't look to me for don't quote me on this. I'm just going to tell you what I feel. I just wanted to see if you had anything to share about that as well.
Well, I love everything you just said. It's just beautiful to me, Shannon, because I think it's there. I think the second that the medium starts to claim authority in any of these areas, we start to pretend to be smart about the spirit world or heaven or whatever, or we start to say that Christianity is the right faith. So if we start to step into any kind of authority that way, and I've even seen people do that politically, by the way. I've seen some
Mhm.
people say, well, I can feel my guides have been telling me that the vaccines don't work and they're not good for
Yeah.
us over the long term. And so they're using their authority in mediumship and they're using it in ways that are very, very harmful.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a really powerful thing to remember that we do this thing called mediumship, but that's it. Like we're limited. And so if the spirit were, if a loved one is asking how they're doing after they passed, I I think it's amazing the kind of evidence you gave such a gorgeous example. I love that so much. Because their loved ones will provide them the information that they need to know that it's them. And they'll provide them the information to help them know that they are at peace. But I
Right.
think beyond that, I don't think we can pretend to know anything more. I really just don't.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. And when someone says, "Are they okay?" I know they're okay because I
Yes.
wouldn't be connecting with them. And I also, it's my belief system is that they're okay. Um, I I just believe that. So I believe they're at peace. But as you said, I really liked that you took that same approach of, I don't want to just blindly say she's okay because I know that. I want her to tell you herself. So that's inspiring too. Now, touching on that, this is something I really want to go into. And I know you have a really great story too that I'd love for you to share. But I want to really talk about the fact that, as you said, we're just people. Um, we're people who either because our brains are built differently or we trained it to work differently, as I did. I wasn't talking to spirit while eating the the oatmeal, but I did eat that Quaker instant oatmeal, and I would always keep the packet. My mom would prop it up because she knew I liked to read. They always had a little picture with a little saying at the bottom of like
Yes.
kids playing in the leaves. And for some reason, it was like my mom would open it. I would always want that while I was eating it. I liked because we didn't have TV or cell phones or anything back then. So I just liked to look at the picture on the back. So that was just a funny memory. But you can train yourself. And I think I'd love to talk about how we can all connect with spirit. And also, I'd love to hear what you think about connecting with your own loved ones. Um, and I'll just start it off by just saying we all can connect with our loved ones. Absolutely. The only reason we go to a medium is because I might be too subjective. If I try to connect with my grandma, I'm also going to think of memories I have of her. I won't know if what I'm hearing in my mind is coming from my own mind or it's actually coming from what's coming from her. So I'd love to talk about giving people sort of tools. What are some ways we can connect, and how can we connect? And why is it that we all have this ability, but we don't even know it?
That's a really good question. Oh my gosh, I love that question, Shannon. I think the how do we connect? The one thing I would offer folks around this is to suspend disbelief, giving yourself permission to feel the connection with your loved one who has died. That's the door, always the door. The how, there's so many hows, right? There's so many different ways in which we can connect. For me, what I do is I put my hand on my heart and I will feel the presence of, I'll just invite the presence of one of my loved ones in spirit to sit with me. And I won't know in advance who that's going to be. And I love that, by the way. I love the mystery of that. And it's always the right person. And I'll just sit because I've never been a good meditator. I don't really know how to meditate the way that proper people meditate, where they're quiet or their mind. I'm like, how does somebody do? I have no idea how they do that. So what I do is I put my hand on my heart and I will do this in the bathtub, to be honest with you, because I'm such a goofy middle-aged gay guy with my little bath soaps and dear God, it's out of control. But I'll often sit in the bathtub or I'll sit in a chair. And I keep it simple because I'm a simple person in that way. I just put my hand on my heart and I literally feel as if their essence, as though I'm blending with them. And I will just start to notice who it is. And it's not how I thought it would be, because I thought it would be me and that person having a conversation in a lovely meadow. And when I first started, I would say it was a little bit like that actually. But over time, it became less and less that. It became more just this sense of communion with another loved one in spirit, just that sense of connection. And I started to let go of all the questions and things. I just let their presence be there. And I put my focus on their presence. And any questions that I had in my heart, they just knew to answer. It wasn't as much of a dialogue as I thought it would be.
Yeah.
But everybody's different. There's not a right way to do it. So I think that practice for people changes and grows and becomes what it needs to. But I am a big believer that we don't need mediums if we can begin to build that connection for ourselves and trust it. Now, I'm not saying mediums aren't important. I think mediumship can be very valuable. But I also want to make sure that the people that I'm serving don't think for a second that when we're done connecting with their loved one, that they have to call me to say something to their loved one. So I always try to create a moment in the experience with me and in the reading where they have their own experience of that connection. Because if they leave the reading curious about their own connection, their life will change. If they leave the reading being curious about how lovely Brian is, because I'm not, but if they leave the reading thinking about that, I feel like I failed them.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. Again, it's taking it out of our ego, and all we are doing is
Um,
we are just as they say, a vessel for spirit. I'm just a mouth for spirit to talk through. That's all it is. I'm just the same as everybody else. 2 years ago, I didn't even know I could do this. So I think Also, and I am someone that meditates, but I do have to do guided meditations, so I will recommend that for people
Yes.
who and I also just want to stress too and see what you think of this is that I mean, you really have to want to do this work. It doesn't mean you can't connect. It doesn't mean you have to practice if you lost your mom and you want to talk to your mom. You don't have to do any of that stuff. All you have to do is ask her to show you signs. You just have to ask for signs and pay attention to the sign that they're and believe that they're coming from spirit and know and believe that the synchronicities that happen are not coincidences. But the
That's right.
second part of that is to do what we do, at least for me, not someone who wasn't born being able to do this just by luck or by their brain chemistry, um, in terms of being able to go into whatever a theta state or to stop the monkey mind. Um, I've practiced this every single day for a year and a half. I every day spend at least 10 minutes sitting in the power, which is I do from YouTube. Tony Stockwell's great. Jason Goldworthy's great. There are a lot of you can do this and and just be conscious and just ask, show up for me today. Show me you're there. I would love to hear some of your other sort of tricks and tips that people can do. And I'm not saying everyone has to do this on a daily basis. I just do because I have a very busy mind.
No, I love it. I think, you know, thing I would just add to that is because you talked about us kind of being the mouthpiece. And I actually think, I'd add to that a little bit that I think in mediumship, we are doing something really profound. We are giving our full presence to the spirit.
Yeah.
So we're giving our feelings, we're giving our mind, and we're giving our heart. We're giving those to spirit to communicate through us. And that's a lot of vulnerability. So I do like to practice when I'm just focusing, I kind of building the power. I call it resting in the grace. It's the
Mm.
same thing. It's just my special goofy name I made up for it. But I actually will picture laying in the river Grace, and I'll be laying on the sandy bottom, and I'll be the river goes through my feet and through my body, and I'll pay attention to which chakras I'm offering vulnerability to and which ones I'm not, because it just gives me insight into where I'm at emotionally. Our emotional state changes all the time. So I'll just check in with myself and I'll just get a sense of how am I today? Am I okay? Am I scared about certain something? Am I upset? Am I sad? Or am I worried? Whatever that thing is. And as I'm doing that, there's a PTSD technique that's a somatic technique we would do in therapy, where if you focus on a body part, it will relax. So when I'm doing that kind of resting in the grace kind of experience in the river, and the river's going through and it's warm and it's comforting, if I notice that my belly is tight, all I will do while I'm doing this gentle breathing is bring my awareness to my belly. And by doing that, it literally, and you're noticing as I'm doing it, I'm bringing my awareness to my belly, it relaxes. And as I'm laying in this river, this grace starts to fill my belly. So I'm softening my nervous system. I'm finding more peace. Does that make sense?
Completely, because it is that thing of where you put your attention. Um, I mean, it's where you put your attention. And that's why mediumship is just putting our attention to the spirit world. And I think the reason it doesn't, I think one thing I wanted to touch on with you is that when we are doing readings, sometimes the information that we're getting isn't coming from spirit. It's our own mind maybe throwing something in there. Or I always say there are different reasons why it's not connecting. Either they're not remembering in that moment, or and a lot of times after a reading, people come back and say, I just remembered what that was, and now I realize that that was correct. But it's also from, and I can speak from experience, sometimes uh my own brain is just getting in the way. And I often do a visualization where I actually picture my soul shifting. For some reason, I always pick the left when I'm doing a reading, and I just say, just spirit, come in around the right and push me out of the way. My ego, just get that out of the way. But I think it is about if it doesn't go well, quote unquote, it's often because maybe my energy is low. I'm not feeling well. I get migraines, and that sometimes interferes, or I'm sick. But I also think when you put your attention there, it's the subtlest shift. And I forget which medium said this. Sorry to whoever it is if it's you, but it was like my students, it's like they're trying to read and it's like they're passing a kidney stone. Like it's not, we're making it so much harder than it has to be.
Yes.
It's just, it's weird. It's one of those less is more things where I'm like, literally all I have to do is sit there and just go, I'm ready to, as Suzanne Guys, is it Geisman or Geisman? Um, as she always says, she just goes, I'm ready to blend now. It's just setting an intention and then just relaxing. But we feel like I have to think it through and what am I seeing? And I have to analyze it. So it's a practice of detaching our ego and saying, literally, do nothing. And I'm an actor too. It's the same thing in acting, where I was going out for commercial auditions and I just kept having to learn to literally do nothing. Don't try, just be. And so, what do you have to say in that regard?
I really love that. I mean, I think I think when we start to acknowledge that mediumship is natural, then if we want to make big fences to get to spirit, we can. So if we decide that before every reading I have to do 30 minutes of meditation and then I have to do 10 Hail Marys before I can connect to spirit, then that's a fence you've just created. Or we can have it be natural. When I'm brushing my teeth, I'll reach out to my mother. I don't plan to, but as I'm brushing my teeth, I'll just kind of feel a shift and I'll say, Mom, I need some help today to be a better husband to my husband, John. Or Mom, can you give me some guidance on my writing? I want to make sure that I'm not writing a book that's all about clever little me or what have you. So I just think when you start to really open up to mediumship, if you can begin to allow the grace that you're trying to offer to also be there for you, the more that we naturally do that for ourselves, the easier it is for us to offer that to others. There's a point at which we have to no longer put ourselves on the line. We have to no longer imagine that if we are doing a reading and it doesn't go the way we wanted it to, that there's a reason for that, that maybe isn't about our skill level. I had a reading one time with a lady recent, and I've been doing this work for over 10 years, about 14 years now. And I feel comfortable with the work now. And it doesn't mean I'm where I need to be. I'm still growing and I'm still expanding with the work. I'm in no way where I want to be. However, I trust it. I really do. I trust the mediumship. And I'm working with this person and I get a sense of a young man with me. I describe him. Mother says, yes, yes, yes. Feel like he died suddenly. Yes, yes, yes. That's it. That's all I got. I could not figure out I could not figure out what had happened. Well, the son had completed suicide and had died 3 days prior. And it was actually reading that this woman had scheduled 3 months prior to connect
Wow.
with her father. But my demands I placed on that spirit were that the whole spirit needs to show up right now, give a message. I need to have all this history. I need to have a sense of so I had all these expectations. But the mother, 3 days after her son died, that's all she needed.
Just to know he was there.
Yes. She could not have, frankly, she could not have handled one bit more of what was offered. But
Yeah.
my demands that I placed on that were about me, had nothing to do with the client, had nothing to do with her need, had nothing to do with where she was at with her grief, had everything to do with me. So I decided that wasn't a good reading. Well, when I reached back to the client, I said, well, I'd like to do a part 2 with you. And she said, Brian, I couldn't have handled anymore. I got it.
Wow.
Because in that moment I thought, well, maybe I messed up, or maybe I went on the link, or maybe I just started to make up all this nonsense about it. When really the spirit's just saying, this is all my mother can handle. So it's interesting how we make this about us at times when it's really the wisdom. The spirit knows what their loved one can hold.
Yeah.
So I
That's
think
so
that's what gets
beautiful.
complicated.
Yeah, I think that's so important. You had said that you had a story. Was it about Angel?
Angel.
I don't know if it's relevant to what we're just talking about, but I don't want to forget to ask you to tell it. So tell it however you want to.
Sure, and I'll do the kind of shortened version of it, but it's in the Letter to Young Medium book, but but this friend Angel, she and I are talking about mediumship, and it's very much aligned with what we're just talking about. But she and I were chatting about it, and I have a pretty serious health issue. I was being placed on these new medicines, and I said to Angel, I said, I'm afraid to take these new medicines because what if my mediumship doesn't work? And
Mm-hmm.
she looked at me and she said, so your mediumship is that fragile? I said, well, yeah. I said, I just don't want to mess it up. And she said, so how do you think about your mediumship? She said, you talk about it as though it's a very fragile teacup. She said, what if it was the stone in the river that whenever you place your hands on it, you could depend on it? That there's nothing in the world that could keep you from that connection, not even yourself. What if that grace was there holding you even when you didn't acknowledge it? What if through any rapids of life, that grace, what if you're gripping the rock and you don't even know it? And that love is holding you through any storm. And it changed everything for me because she said, and she really pretty much said it. She said, Brian, you have a God problem. You don't think God loves you. You still have this belief that if you're good enough, that God will love you. You're still working from that idea that if you're successful, then you're okay. And she said, what if you were completely loved right now? What if who you are in this moment is enough? And what's wild about that is my friend Angel died less than a month after that conversation. And so it was really a profound gift she gave me because, I believe that this ability showed up in my life to teach me the lessons I was meant to learn. So I don't think that I'm on some higher spiritual plane, or I just don't buy that. It just seemed, I can't imagine this being about that. I think that's such a human perspective. I just don't believe it. I worked with children with disabilities who are a lot wiser than we are in a lot of ways. So I just can't accept that somehow having this ability makes you spiritually, whatever, fancy.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous to me. But I love what Angel said, that what if mediumship was about teaching a young man who thought God hated him that I was also worthy of that love? Wouldn't it be worth it?
That's beautiful. I love that. And that's, I think, what is so special about why I'm so honored. And I actually, when I talk to God and my spirit guides every day, one of the main things I always say is, thank you for allowing me to do this work. Thank you for the honor of doing this work because I don't take it lightly. It's not something I take for granted. And it is something that's the beauty of it is there are lessons in everything we do. Even if I'm reading you, I'm also learning from spirit just as much as you're benefiting from the comfort. Um, it's just it's such a gift. And I think that's why when I was saying earlier that it almost feels we have to take money for our work because it's our time and because that's what we've chosen to devote our life to. And obviously everyone has to make a living. But I said
Yes.
sometimes it feels hard, which and that's my own stuff because it is such an honor and such a privilege. And I get so much out of the connection between my sitter and me and the spirit world. Nothing will make you feel more at peace than being in that connecting with another soul in that way, in such a sacred way. And yet I know it's an exchange and it's your time. And I'd love to do it for free all the time, but who's going to pay the bills? So I think that's what's so beautiful about this is that we can all learn from one another. And also, I love the idea that we can teach one another, not just you and me, but people out there, not in a preachy way, but anyone who's willing to learn to do this work can. And that's what I really want to impart to the listeners too, is that if you think there's something special about, yes, some mediums are meant to be mediums. That's their path. Some mediums were born this way. They can't even help it. Some mediums see spirit. I have a friend who sees orbs everywhere she goes and they're all around and she just can't stop seeing them. As much as she would like to maybe shut it off sometimes, she can't. That's her gift, or her ability. But the thing is that I think it's important to learn know that if you have the the um the desire, you can learn. I was an atheist for half my life, I didn't, and if I can do it, anyone can do it. So um I think
Can I
that's
challenge you on one thing? Can I add something
yeah,
to that?
please.
Because I love what you're saying. We really have a lot of alignment in our beliefs. But what I would also say to you is what I think is also miraculous is that no one can do mediumship the way that you do.
That's true.
And that to me is where it becomes very powerful and very moving for me. And when you were starting to bring through one of my loved ones in my family, I was thinking now that's a loved one that seldom comes through. So I'm thinking, and you literally gave very specific information, but I couldn't believe it. I was like, you're listing all these things up. I'm like, yep, 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 yep. It was like crazy. It's amazing.
Wow.
So what's interesting is I start to wonder as a medium, now this beautiful soul in my life, she chose Shannon to speak through her.
Hmm.
Why did she choose Shannon? Because I believe there's parts of your soul that she can only communicate through you.
Yeah.
I've always kind of, so I get curious about that. I'm like, why did this loved one choose Shannon?
Yeah.
And so that to me is where it gets, that's where we do get to matter in all this. That's where our soul and the way that we love and the grace and you have this fairness about you. And you have this demand that everybody feel that the grace is there for them too. And so of course you pick one of my loved ones. It's like this very radical about that idea that everybody's included. There's a there's a seat at the table for everyone.
Yeah.
And that's a very spirit that wouldn't come through every medium. So
Right.
that's kind of there's some nuance there that's I just find fascinating. And I get really curious about it. Kind of tells me about the medium by who they
Hmm.
bring through for me.
Yeah, it's true.
Cool.
And I
I love
also
that.
love sometimes I one of my strongest readings was with, I'm going to give a shout out to Kenny, who is a loyal listener, watcher, and is one of the most lovely people I've ever met in my life. And he's watches every video and leaves the most thoughtful comments, and asked for a reading from me to bring through his wife. And that it was around the time I was having some doubt. And I thought, oh no, well, I know he lost his wife. I don't want to make up stories in my mind. And I said, all right, no expectations here. And that woman came through, like, the stuff that she gave me was
Yes.
so amazing. I get chills. That's the story I tell when I'm like, I can't even believe the validation she brought through. And he said, you're a lot like her, kind of like, and he also said, I felt like you were her when I was sitting in front of you, because there's also something where the spirit, you can bring through any spirit, but there's some where you just click with them and you feel like we're the same kind of soul and our souls recognize each other. And she was joking. She was giving me charades, and I was like, she's really like wanting to play a lot of word games. And I said, and she's
Oh,
showing me like crossword puzzles and word games, and she's saying brain games. And he said, yeah, that was like her thing. She really did that. And
mhm.
and I was like, and when she's giving me the information, she's going, this image plus this image equals this image. And I was getting this stuff through her, and it's like, because I'm very verbal, and
Mhm.
and so it's interesting that sometimes if the spirit and you have a lot in common and you can relate with one another, it's with each other, it's really interesting to see how suddenly I'm like, this is an easy reading. She's easy. And so it
Well, but I
does,
want
there's
to highlight something
compatibility.
there.
Uh-huh.
You mentioned that before the reading, you were going through a season of doubt.
Yeah.
And so I just want to highlight that because our state of mind as a medium doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
And so I have health issues. So I started to imagine that, oh, can't read today because I've got a bad headache today. Can't do the
Right.
work. And I started after Angel had that conversation with me, I started to challenge some of my beliefs about that. And I thought, well, what if I offer myself as a medium when I'm not feeling good?
Yeah.
What if I offer myself as a medium when I'm feeling down? What if I offer myself as a medium when I'm not feeling confident? And I started to recognize it works anyway.
Yeah.
Going back a little bit to the idea of the rock and the river, that this is something that we can depend on. And I think that's actually the difference between the mediocre medium and the really, really powerful medium is that. I really believe that because when you watch someone like James Van Prague work, there's a stability for him in that foundation of his work. He could be in whatever mood he's in. It doesn't even cross his mind.
Yeah.
And I think it's Mavis Patel that said, we have to get to a point with our mediumship where we can do it when a train is coming at us. And I love that, because that means that we trust this. There's a
Yeah.
point at which we have the responsibility to trust that this is here for us, that we're not just, that we're included in the grace, that we're included in the love. And I think that's where things can really shift for us. And I think that's where classes can be hard, can be dangerous in a way for somebody, because we can hide there. We can go to all these classes and our mind will be satisfied thinking that we're growing in our mediumship. Our mind will be like, well, I've taken 5 years of classes at SNU and I've traveled up to England for the last 5 years. But I don't think that's necessarily going to ensure that you're good at the work of mediumship.
Yeah.
I think the work of mediumship requires exactly what you're doing and what you did with me, what you did with us earlier. You have to have the willingness. It doesn't matter how you feel by yourself. You just have to have the willingness to allow the words to come out.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have the willingness to open your heart and trust what's coming through.
Yeah.
And I think that's the more we just do that, the more we start to trust it. And the more we can kind of tell when we're in the river where we're getting information that's accurate. Because I think for me, I couldn't always differentiate between my mind and spirit when I started. I just couldn't. And then at a certain point, it became really obvious, because mediumship has such an emotional urgency to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I could get in that river, and it almost made me more uncomfortable, frankly. And that's when I knew I was in the right space. It's when I was a little bit uncomfortable, kind of an edge to it, urgency, kind of a reaching through. And that's when I also could clarify that wasn't psychic, because it's reaching through. And when we get into that space, we're being asked to be really vulnerable. We're being asked to be willing to have somebody say no. We're being asked to trust the spirit so much that the client may not say yes until we've given 20 pieces of information,
Mm-hmm.
but we stand by that spirit. And that to me is where things really shift.
Thank you. I think, I mean, I know we could talk for hours and hours and hours, and I actually would love to do more with you. And because I just
You're
think
lovely, Jan. It
thank
meant a lot.
you.
The connection you offered me, I can't even tell you how much that meant to me. I feel so, I'm so touched by it. And you just took the risk to say it. And it was, not only was it accurate, but it's exactly who I needed to hear from. So
Wow.
I can't thank you enough, and that's what I mean. Regardless of our state of mind, if we can just trust enough to say it, we can change the world for the person across from us.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much for being here, Brian. I am so glad we connected and that we did this together. And I know it will inspire a lot of people and get people excited about the idea that our loved ones are right here with us. There's just a thin little veil there that between us and them. And I think that that's why this podcast is called Magic is Real, to just let people know that we're conditioned to think that magic, it's all fantasy. All of this stuff is fantasy, and don't go there. We can't afford to live in that world. It's not realistic. And when you find out that that world does exist, it turns your world into sort of, for all of the good and all of the bad, the pain, there's grief, but there's also this magic in it when you really wake up knowing that today I'm going to hear from spirit. Today, spirit's going to guide me. It doesn't mean everything's going to go your way, the way that you think you'd like it to go. But as I love that expression of things aren't happening to us, they're happening for us, whether we understand it now or
Wow.
not.
Love that.
Yeah. And people will say, well, why would something horrible happen? That's not for me. But in the spiritual sense, we'll understand it later. And I think it's important to just try to keep that perspective if you can, and just remember that as hard as it gets, it's not to minimize anyone's pain, but just to understand that there's always a lesson in it and there's always something we can learn from it. So thank you for demonstrating that today, and just wish you all the best. And I really do recommend your book. It's honestly, it's very well written, as you're a very good speaker, but it also is really resonating with me in a way that I'm taking time with it. I think it's to just, and it is that message of trust, get in the basket, let go, trust, believe, and just go with the flow.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm really grateful.
My pleasure.